I work in a law office and regularly have to go file documents with the court. I have learned, from watching one interaction, not to fuck with the clerks at the filing window. A lot of people probably don't know / wouldn't believe how detailed the rules are for submitting documents to the court. There are rules regarding the type of paper you can use, the exact spacing of the heading on the paper, the exact measurements of the 2-hole punches at the top of the paper, etc. There are literally dozens of rules on how to format your filings. In my experience, these rules are rarely enforced. The clerks will reject documents if there are major errors, missing signatures, incorrectly filled out, etc. But will usually let things slide like your 2-hole punches not being precisely 2 3/4 inches apart. But there was one day where I saw a clerk take sweet revenge against someone who totally had it coming. I was standing in line, waiting to file something, and a notoriously huge prick of an attorney got called up to the window. The clerk asked him something, like, "I'm really sorry, Mr. Notoriously huge prick, but you're missing some attachment to this form." He reacted as if she had just stood from her chair, flipped him the bird, and went to shit on his mother's grave. He starts yelling about how she didn't know what the fuck she was doing. A trained ape could do her job. He would be complaining to her supervisor, and on and on. He goes stomping away, and she looks much calmer than you would expect for someone who just got reamed out by this enormous douchebag. I get called up to her window, and say something, like, "I'm so sorry you had to deal with that." She replies, "It's fine. He's on my list now." I'm curious, so I ask what she means. Her response was fantastic. She says Mr. Notoriously Huge Prick handles a lot of family law cases. He'll be wanting to file things here, and his paperwork is bound to land on my desk. For people like him, I get out the formatting sections of the rules of court, and I make sure he's followed every one of them. She points to my filing, and says, "Your 2-hole punches look off. You see how one is higher than the other? They are supposed to be a certain distance from the top of the page. I'm not going to reject yours, but next time he drops something off at the filing box, you better believe I'm going to bust out my ruler." I say how awesome that is, but once he sees the reason his document was rejected, he'll just have an assistant fix it, or whatever. She replies, "We don't have to tell him why it was rejected specifically, just that it violated some rule of formatting. He can figure that out for himself if he ever wants to have another document filed." She looked so happy. I lost it at a subway a while back. This story isn't about me losing it at a person myself, but I found someone who could and did. The subway I go to is inside a skating rink, and on this day it was flooded with newly pubescent boys thinking that treating people like absolute horseshit is how you act like a macho man. One girl behind the counter was near tears, and the other woman was trying to hold her own ground against a bunch of 13-year-olds. "It was you fucking bitch. I didn't fucking ask for mayo. Are you blind? For fuck's sake, that's not toasted enough. When I get a job, I'm gonna be making more than you." Just a taste of some of what I heard. So I went out to the lobby of the skating rink, found a woman nearby, and asked her if she was with the boys in subway, which she was, and then I told her to follow me. The look on the boys' faces when she let out her angered screech after listening to them was friggin' priceless. She made the boys pay for their own food. One boy didn't get to finish making his sandwich. Wrap it up how it is, and he'll pay for it. And from what I gathered as she practically dragged them out of there was the boys who weren't hers. She was going to speak to their parents, followed by strong protests as she told them to pack their crap, as she was taking them home early. I left the girls at Subway a nice tip, and they gave me a cookie. Never fuck with an angry mom. This crazy guy frequented the convenience store where I used to work. He would come in and put $2 worth of fuel in his car 3 or 4 times a day, because the N*** steal my gas. He'd say, if there was a black person in the store he'd yell and swear at them, call them names, and tell them to stop following him. Well, one day he started on this short skinny guy, who ignored him at first. Crazy guy keeps on and skinny guy finally smirks, and says something like, Are you talking to me, brother? At which point crazy guy, who I should add, was also a large guy, turns around and pushes the guy. The little guy then proceeded to knock the crazy guy on his ass, drag him outside, and beat the living shit out of him before the cops came. Edit. For those of you wondering what happened next, both guys got arrested. I had to close the store long enough to make a statement and a copy of the surveillance video for the police. I was the only employee on duty at the time. I never saw either one of them again. A few weeks later the crazy guy called the store to try to find out what happened to his vehicle. He was surprisingly polite and easy to deal with. Maybe getting arrested resulted in him getting some kind of help. I don't know. He never came back to the store that I know of. For those of you wondering why the guy wasn't banned from the store, or why we didn't do this or that to prevent the situation, the guy was asked to leave and not come back. He either didn't understand or wouldn't listen. We called the cops, but he always managed to leave before they got there. We had his license plate number written down for reference, but the police either couldn't or wouldn't chase the guy down and pull him over just because he was not very nice to some people at the gas station. Also, until the aforementioned incident he never touched anyone, and our cameras didn't have audio at the time, so we had no evidence that he had done anything. Also, I don't know what gas stations are like where you guys are from, but the one where I worked had only one employee on duty 80% of the time, and it was a busy store. You could try refusing the guy service, but honestly it was easier sometimes to just take his money and get him the hell out. After trying everything I could think of with no result. Sorry if that makes it sound like I didn't care or something. Maybe I'm a little desensitized. I worked overnights at that place for a year, all by my just over 5 feet tall, 120 pound self. I saw much weirder / scarier shit than this. Anyway, chances are a few guys named it. We thought of it and tried it. So just hush. I'm done answering questions for now. My thumbs are tired. I didn't even know that was possible. I was working in a sketchy part of Albuquerque when I realized a guy was following me through the parking lot. Started walking faster, so did he. I knew I wasn't going to get into my car before he reached me, so I took the knife out of my purse and turned around and shoved it in his face and yelled him from Wisconsin I can gut idea. Dude took off and I got in my car shaking. When I was a senior in high school, I was at some house party. There was this chick named Rachel there, a notoriously crazy bitch who was known for causing trouble anywhere she went. She was also a pretty big girl, maybe 5'9", broad shoulders. Anyway, out of nowhere she just starts screaming at another girl, Sarah, a shorter, skinny thing, who was seriously on the other side of the room doing absolutely nothing. Rachel gets up in her face, starts cursing her out, pushing her multiple times, obviously just trying to start shit for the hell of it. Rachel finally decides to throw a punch, and I shit you not, like a flash of light, Sarah just launches at Rachel, starts beating the living shit out of her face, knocks her on her ass and strongholds Rachel's hair and starts slamming her skull on the brick fireplace in the house. I think she must have knocked Rachel out for a minute, because Sarah decided she was done, and just stood up and walked away. Turns out Sarah's older sister was a competitive female boxer and showed her a thing or two about fighting. Definitely the best girl fight I've ever seen. I'm a pretty calm person, but when someone treats someone badly, it makes my blood boil. I have calmed down with age, but one story comes to mind. In 6th grade, this boy named Logan would constantly pick on another classmate named Dustin. Dustin was born with a defect. His legs did not fully form, he had prosthetics, and he had other issues which require him to wear a diaper. In all other ways, Dustin was a happy and cool dude. He was just given a bad hand in life. Logan was constantly picking on Dustin. He would call him peg leg, make fun of his mother for making a deformed baby, and occasionally made fun of the fact he had to wear a diaper. Logan usually got away with doing whatever he wanted, because his family had money and power in our town. My sweet English teacher, where Dustin, Logan and I all shared a class, would send him to the principal constantly. Finally, it came to a boiling point. We sat alphabetically in class. I sat in the front desk, Logan behind me, and Dustin behind Logan. As Dustin was walking to his desk, something inspired Logan to trip Dustin. Dustin, walking with a cane, obviously tripped badly and hit the wall. I saw red. I stood up, punched Logan so hard in the chest that he fell over 2 rows of desks. He gathered himself and stood up screaming, "Did you see what she did to me?" My teacher had this small smirk. She said, "I saw nothing." Logan never spoke toward Dustin again. Dustin passed away a few years ago due to health complications. Poor fella. Was tending bar at a dive when I was in college, and this guy Dave came in every day, had 2 beers and left. He was a pretty quiet guy and basically just kept to himself. He wasn't particularly big, but he wasn't small either. One day 2 rednecks came in, right after we opened, and started pounding beers. When Dave came in, they smarted off to him as he walked by, but he ignored them. I poured his first beer and told the guys to leave him alone. They didn't. Just being total dicks. I told them I was closing their tab and they had to go. As far as they were concerned, Dave was the reason they were getting kicked out. One of the rednecks stood up and proceeded to tell Dave that he would kick his ass for being such a pussy. He responded with, "I've done enough fighting in my life." The way he said it was cold. Dave had obviously seen some shit. All of a sudden the redneck sucker punched Dave in the side of the head while he was still sitting in the bar stool. Dave casually stood up and started taking his coat off, and the redneck hit him square in the cheek. It was a full-blown knock to the jaw. Dave did not even flinch. The other redneck that was still seated said, "Damn, not like damn, oh you got hit." It was more like, "Damn, Leroy, I done fucked up." Dave calmly finished taking his jacket off, placed it on the back of the chair, and the redneck went to throw another punch. Dave caught the blow with his hand, grabbed the redneck by the face like he was palming a basketball, and in one fell swoop slammed his head against the side of the bar. Dave then dragged him through the bar, still by his face, and carried him out the back and threw him in the dumpster, again, still by his face. When Dave came back in, he started over to the other mouthy redneck, who at this point was making a run for the door, and Dave kicked him in the middle of the back, bending his entire body backwards into the shape of C. The sheer momentum of the kick ended up slamming him face first into big wooden door that only opened inward. The dude stood up, and it looked as though his face had fucking exploded. Dave came back over, calmly apologized, and said he was just glad he didn't kill them. I totally believed he meant that. Said he wouldn't come back as not to cause any more trouble, and I made absolutely sure he knew he was 100% good in my book. Dave never paid for another beer as long as I worked there. I was a whitewater raft guide and had an obnoxious older man in my boat who kept throwing strokes on me, aka putting his paddle in the water when I was telling him to stop. He was fighting with his wife the entire time down the river, and she kept telling him to knock it off, because I guess this was the annual family vacation, and plus she knew it was awkward for me to be listening to all their drama. He was being rude, obnoxious, and mean. He had 2 kids in the boat as well, and they looked uncomfortable and sad. We came up to a rapid with an infamous rock of if I tap it with my left side, the person sitting up front almost always will get dumped out. Right before we came on this rapid, I had the man switch with his son, who was sitting in front left. Yes, I rammed into that rock, and he got to swim down some class 4 rapids. He wasn't happy, but he definitely didn't put his paddle in the water anymore, unless I told him to. The best part was, when we got off the river, he stalked off bitching about how wet he was, and whining about how he almost died. When he vanished, his wife handed me a $100 tip. My father recently told me this story about this Ashat who he works with driving trucks for different distributors. They have no smoking areas, since food productions etc. But this asshole decided to smoke there anyway, putting his butts out in a styrofoam cup. Anyway, after a while his truck was loaded and decided to just throw the cup out the window after getting in his truck, when a man walked past and asks him calmly to pick the cup up and put it in the bin. To which this intellectual giant of a driver says, "If it's so important, why don't you put it in the bin before driving off?" Without making much of a reaction, he picked it up, walked to the bin, then makes his way back inside. When my father gets back to the main truck depot, he sees this driver getting yelled at by his boss. Turns out there was a conference being held with some overseas members of the company and the seer of which was told to pick up the cup. They instantly barred the driver from the site and all associated sites, and my father's boss had to jump through hoops to not lose the contract renewal. I can't imagine the level of ecstasy that Sia would have felt during the whole situation, knowing that this prick doesn't know who he is. I live in a college town where a certain population is rich, out-of-state kids who come here for the skiing and legal part. One night, around 1 AM, I was leaving the bars and saw one such gentleman. He was dressed in standard "my dad is a lawyer and will sue you" clothes, pastel button down, backwards hat, khaki shorts, and Sperry's. He was also very drunk. He was being a general inebriated nuisance as he walked towards his car. He walked into a middle-aged, slightly pudgy guy wearing jeans and a black shirt. The young guy started throwing obscenities at the middle-aged guy, just being an ass. As the young guy turned to get into his brand new Audi A4, the older gentleman said, "You aren't planning on driving, are you?" A young guy stopped, collected his thoughts, and then turned to sass the older gentleman. "I drive better drunk while getting head than you ever could." The old guy said something about he would recommend not doing that, and young guy shouted back. By this point, young guy is screaming, and threw the drink he was carrying. At this time, I realized that there were a couple other guys with the old guy, also nondescript, also bald, also wearing jeans. You know, kinda would look good in aviators. Kinda got mustaches. Kinda got that cop feel to 'em. So then, as the young guy throws his drink and hits one of them, one of the plainclothes police officers pulls out his taser and tases the shit out of the young guy. I mean, more than is necessary. He goes down, screaming, while his brothers and prostitute girlfriend watch. His buddies consider getting involved, then back off when the police identify themselves. Remember